You hear it all the time in the game's criticism sphere. Oh, that new game that's coming out that you like? The one that looks really cool and fun? Don't you know that it's just a knockoff of Earthbound or something? It's just a quirky Earthbound-inspired RPG with a dark horror twist. How cliche, right? This complaint is used to dismiss basically any indie game that exists, from Eastward to OMORI to even Undertale. Today I'm going to be talking about why this complaint is complete bullshit. And to do that, I'm going to illustrate just how different each of these games are to not only Earthbound, but to each other. There is a lot of variation here to write them all off as the same carbon copy products. I think the earliest game to get criticism for this is the 2004 game Yume Nikki. Yume Nikki is a game about a girl going through her surreal dreamscape. Already the premise is completely different to Earthbound itself. That's a much more standard road trip around the world. Yume Nikki is also considerably darker, and definitely more abstract in terms of interpretation. Earthbound's plot is fairly cut and dry, while Yume Nikki's story is subtle in several ways as most of it is interpreted through the visual imagery of Madotsuki's dreams. Also, there's no combat in the game, which completely removes one of the core aspects of Earthbound's gameplay. Overworld traversal, being from a bird's eye view, is pretty much the only similarity, and that's just true of most RPGs. I mean, there's pixel art, I guess, but the style is totally different. Next on the chopping block is Undertale. This game probably has the most similarities to Earthbound of any of the games that I'm going to be talking about today. It has turn-based battles, it has a limited inventory, and it's definitely got similar humor in some instances. However, Undertale is actually fun to play. Joking aside, Undertale does have a significantly different battle system as compared to Earthbound's. Undertale takes a lot more inspiration from the bullet hell genre of games. Also, Undertale's ethos is entirely different from Earthbound. Undertale's a story about choice. Earthbound doesn't really give you much choice in anything besides naming people, I guess. Earthbound's narrative is more of a coming-of-age story than anything else, while Undertale's a story about the player's interactions with the game world in the most literal sense imaginable. And again, the art direction is completely different. Sure, there's a bird's eye view in pixel art, but it's less unified than Earthbound's, and battles are way different with how they present completely black and white enemies. Color is an important part of battles in Undertale, with it mechanically interacting with the game, and in Earthbound it's simply not. OMORI is a game that I've talked about a lot, and frankly I'm kind of sick of talking about it. With that being said, a lot of people brush it off as Earthbound-inspired, when really there's not much Earthbound inspiration here at all. Again, it uses pixel art and is a turn-based RPG. But there's an emotion status condition system, and the plot is much more about trauma and guilt than childhood whimsy. There's a direct reference to Earthbound in the abyss of Sunny's mind, but otherwise there's nothing that really Earthboundy about this game. The overall art direction of OMORI is like a strange mix between Undertale and Pokemon, and its battles have completely different presentation with beautiful hand-drawn art. If anything, it's a love letter to Yume Nikki in some portions that are heavily reminiscent of that game. Finally, let's talk about Eastward. I know it's not a very popular game by any stretch of the imagination, though it has found some success, but I really like it, and I'm a bit sick of people deciding that it's just another one of those quirky indie RPGs. Eastward is vastly different to Earthbound. It's got real-time combat, much more vibrant animations, and a style of humor that is very different. Earthbound's writing is more focused on one-off side characters than anything else, which we see a lot of in Undertale. Eastward is about following the lives of characters throughout the game and seeing what they get up to and their personal stories as they intersect with yours in comedic ways. And as I said before, the presentation is leagues ahead of Earthbound in every way. Every character has so many unique animations, every single NPC is their own unique presence. It's really something incredible how much work was put into the art direction of this game. Earthbound doesn't have anything like that, though it is graphically impressive, it's nowhere near as insanely detailed as Eastward. To be fair, there's no possible way it could have been, because it came out almost 30 years before Eastward, but I'm not really trying to insult Earthbound by saying this. I'm just saying that it's distinctly different. Really, none of this is to say that Earthbound is a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. Though I do think it's a bad game, that's for another time. I'll do a full video on Earthbound eventually. I just think that Earthbound's unique slew of mechanics have never really been implemented into an RPG in the same way as it was when it first came out, aside from its own sequel which expanded on them. So to say something is Earthbound-inspired doesn't really seem to mean anything. It's just a hollow insult people throw at games. Like, what does EarthBound-Inspired even mean? Do any of those games I just listed sound similar to you in any way? Sure, they all have funny dialogue, pixel art, and bird's eye views, but does that really capture the spirit of Earthbound? Earthbound is a game about growing up, about experiencing the world through the eyes of a child and seeing all it has to offer. Many of those things being fantastical and outrageous through the eyes of a kid. It's about growing past your inner demons in order to rise to the challenge of saving the world. It's about all the little things you encounter along the way. It's childhood whimsy. Compare that to OMORI, a game about a boy who can't even leave his house because of his own crushing guilt that he's been subconsciously covering for the past few years. Or Eastward, a post-apocalyptic game about two people seeing the world as death and destruction follow them in their wake. There's no epidemic of quirky Earthbound-inspired indie RPGs. Anybody who uses this argument is just being dismissive of video games for the sake of it, and frankly, I'm tired of that. This has been Arcade and Everlasting, who really should play Lisa eventually, signing off. Thank you for watching.